The Audio Beacon, August 2022. Now is the cool of the day, a forest gathering for Midsummer and Lammas at Enbourne. Last July 2021, Father Gary organised Church in the Forest at Enbourne. It was such a success that this year's repeat was eagerly anticipated. We were not disappointed. Like most days this summer, Sunday 24th of July was a splendid day. It was bright and warm, just suitable for an outdoor evening service. Taking place in the churchyard, there was an organised informality about the service. Brilliantly organised once again by Father Gary, the service combined those key features of readings, music and prayer. One of the readings was given by Jenny to remind us that we are officially still part of the Walbury Beacon Benefice, though all our services and pastoral care are the responsibility of St George's and St John's. We have been wonderfully looked after by them. Roger Pope would be thrilled. It was a great pleasure to meet his son Stuart at the service. Once again, the service left us looking forward to the next one, hopefully in less than a year. It was a great pleasure to see about 40 people on Sunday sharing together in this inspirational worship. The partnership with the Benefice of South Newbury has been a great success. We have enjoyed the talents of the clergy who have taken our services. We wish the Reverend Julie a most successful ministry in Hurstbourne Tarrant, and we have been most grateful for the Reverend Becky's leadership. We are, of course, delighted that a new priest has been appointed to Walbury Beacon, although we will no longer be part of that benefice. We must not forget Jenny, whose contribution to the Walbury Beacon benefice has been immense. One of my pleasures now is talking to the elderly members of the congregation. I have learnt much from them about old Enbourne. In the Newbury Weekly News of 14th of July, there is a lovely photo of the top 10 of the Miss Newbury competition of 1947. Miss Rosamond Curtis came third. Ros has been a member of our congregation for the past 50 years. Ros was born in Peasmore 95 years ago. Before she was 10, the family had moved to Newbury. She was a bright girl who won a scholarship to Newbury Girls' Grammar School. Her accounts of that school during the Second World War are well worth listening to. Ros was a member of a Christian family, many of whom played a key part in parish life. Some were bell ringers. Ros has led a varied and active life. She married Harry, an American serviceman, and lived for some years in the USA. Fortunately for us, she and Harry returned to Newbury, both becoming key members of our congregation. By John King. Prayers and Bears by Jill Guy. Our picnic in the old Rectory Garden, Kintbury, was great fun. The weather was kind, story and singing much enjoyed, while the social time with games completed a very happy time for the preschoolers and their carers. There is no meeting during August, but we look forward to September, when we will start in the chapel for story, singing and prayers at 1:45 p.m, before going to St Mary's Room for a social time. A brief introduction and welcome to the Benefice's new rector by Jenny Vesey. Reverend Mark Wilson left Walbury Beacon Benefice and Kintbury in October 2020. Our much-loved Reverend Tim then held the fort for almost a year, retiring in September 2021, since when it has all been a bit of a slog. So, we're delighted that Reverend Annette Shannon accepted the post of half-time rector for the benefice and will be joining us in a licensing service with Bishop Olivia in St Mary's Church at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, 31st of August. Welcome, Annette. The letter which Annette has written to us, just to give us a little bit of reassuring background information about herself, was published in the July 2022 issue of the Beacon, which can be read on the Benefice website or a church near you, or email Phil on pji@crestednewtcomputing.co.uk for a copy to be emailed. Annette comes from a rural, multi-parish benefice, not dissimilar to our own, and is really looking forward to the move and to getting to know the village and the people for whom she will have spiritual and pastoral responsibility, just as we are all looking forward to welcoming her and Dave. Jenny. Prayer and praise. Friday evening prayer and praise services start again in the chapel in St Mary's Church, Kintbury, at 6:30 p.m. on the first Friday of each month, starting in September. We sing and worship together, have a simple service of agape with prayer and Bible study, followed by a social time at the old rectory. All are most welcome to join us. Jill Guy. Prayer. Olivia sends out a prayer request email each month. Perhaps we need to remind ourselves what we mean by prayer. One of the best explanations I have come across, especially regarding communal prayer, comes from Evelyn Underhill, who says that prayer is man's nearest approach to absolute action. It means the closest association of which any soul is at any time capable with the living and everywhere present God, who is the true initiator of all that we really do. As a recent recipient of your prayers in my recent COVID widowhood, may I say how grateful my family and I are for your prayers and how they are helping to keep us going. Penny Fletcher. Standing Up for Your Rights in an Unequal Society by Tessa Locke. The What's More Common case, as reported in the Hampshire Chronicle of 1840. The law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose off the common, but leaves the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose. 18th century protest song. The early 19th century had seen very many changes to rural life. The Enclosure Acts had enabled landowners to fence off areas of agricultural land, thus increasing the size of their farms, whilst frequently stopping poorer people from accessing common lands for the purpose of grazing or gathering firewood. Our countryside is still dotted with areas marked on the OS map as such and such common, and our rights to roam those areas are still, at times, hotly contested, as we in West Berkshire know only too well. In the 19th century, however, having access to the local common continued to be about much more than just the right to roam. Most poorer people used wood as fuel for cooking and heating, so being able to gather underwood was vital for life. In 1840, the Manor of Coombe, by which I mean the land adjoining as well as the manor house itself, belonged to the Provost and Fellows of King's College, Cambridge. It was not uncommon then for the colleges of both Oxford and Cambridge to own land around the country, as indeed they still do. In the case of Coombe, the land was then farmed by tenant farmers with a type of tenancy agreement known as copyhold. Coombe Manor lands included an area known then as Wadsmore Common, possibly close to the area identified on modern OS maps as Wadsmere Down, where underwood, which is to say wood from smaller trees and bushes growing beneath the taller, established trees, could be collected. But who had the right to collect their firewood at Wadsmore Common? This was an issue to be decided in a court case of 1840, the details of which we know because the Hampshire Chronicle reported it in detail. As well as recording the events of the trial, the Chronicle's account unwittingly reflects social conventions and attitudes of the time, including, in particular, an awareness of class differences. At that time, the copyholders, or tenants of King's College, were Mr. William Hooper and Mr. Robert Hooper. The steward of the manor was a Mr. Hughes. The use of the designation Mr. by the Hampshire Chronicle is very deliberate and follows a convention which reveals a lot about society of the time. The styling Mr. indicates a higher social standing than that enjoyed by Farmer Kingston. also mentioned in the case, who is himself on a rung or two above that of the cottagers mentioned, such as William Hall, a shepherd. Being of lower status, Haller is not described as Mr. This distinction mattered. It seems that the trouble started in January 1840, when a 30-year-old shoemaker called John Cummings helped himself, on several occasions, to a niche, or small bundle, of underwood from the common. Farmer and copyholder Mr. Robert Hooper took exception to this, and the case was taken to the magistrates' court, where it was passed to the assizes in Winchester. The attorney for the plaintiff, Henry Earl of Andover, tried to make the case that it was the copyholders who had the right to gather underwood, not the cottagers, like Cummings. The copyholders maintained that they were the ones in the habit of collecting underwood, not the cottagers, and this contention was supported by the steward of the manor, Mr. Hughes, Woodman Bulpit, and Mr. John Newton of Manor Farm, who said that as he wasn't a copyholder, he did not collect wood from Wadsmore. Newton seems to have taken the "it's nothing to do with me" line, just in case anyone might think he was implicated. He would not want to offend those with authority over him. A shepherd, William Hall, employed by the plaintiff, Robert Hooper, said he had known Wadsmore Common for as long as he could remember, but that he did not know who cut the wood there. I suspect that Shepherd Hall considered this to be the most diplomatic answer. It would have been very difficult for him to speak up against his employer, or to implicate in any way his neighbouring cottagers. Ignorance, probably, seemed the best defence. As with Newton, Hall seems to have adopted the "I know nothing" line of defence. Speaking for the defendant, a Mr. Carow addressed the jury next. He explained that he was placed in a situation of considerable difficulty because he had to contend against the wealth and respectability of the plaintiff in this action. Such a nuanced comment indicates to the modern reader just how much there was an assumption in favour of those with more money and a position further up the social ladder. It must have been difficult for Carow to admit that he believed Cummings the shoemaker to be in the right. He said that his learned friends had laid much stress on the word copyholder, but that he contended that there was no such appurtenant to the copyholds as that which had been set up by his learned friends on the opposite side. In other words, being a copyholder did not give a person the exclusive rights to the underwood, as the prosecution had tried to establish. This was to challenge what many people had regarded as the accepted social order of the time. Carow then called witnesses for the defence, including Edward Joyce of Coombe. Joyce said he had known people cut wood on the common scores of times, and named them. He had cut wood along with his father for 40 years, and never been asked to leave. He said he had had conversations with Mr. Hooper Senior, who had said, more than once, that the common was the poor man's right. Joseph Haynes, a gardener, formerly of Coombe, but now of Stockbridge, said he had always cut wood with his brother and his mother, and had seen others do so without ever being forbidden. When cross-questioned, he said he had come forward voluntarily and at his own expense. So the testimony of Joyce and Haynes debunked the Hoopers' contention that only copyholders gathered underwood. They had stood up for their rights and challenged authority. It was not the copyholders' exclusive right to collect underwood. What the Hoopers had said was incorrect. Mr. Justice Coleridge's summing up was complicated, but the final question put to the jury to decide was whether the plaintiff's right to cut underwood on Wadsmore Common was appurtenant and belonging to his copyhold or not. The jury returned a verdict for the defendant. The attorney, Henry Earl, it seems, was not impressed at having lost this case. Tessa Locke. Enbourne Coffee Morning, on Saturday, 30th of July. Enbourne enjoyed a wonderful coffee morning on the last Saturday of July. The weather could not have been better, as we gathered in the churchyard for the first coffee morning since Roger's death. Over 40 people came, and £110 was raised. The morning celebrated the past and the future. We remembered the Walbury Beacon Benefice, especially Jenny's ministry, and we gave thanks for our partnership with St George's and St John's. It was a real joy to see the Reverend Becky and Father Gary, and to welcome so many of Enbourne's past congregation. The old days were remembered, and the future was thought of. We were especially pleased to be reminded of our patronal festival and evensong on the last Sunday of September at 6:30 p.m. John King briefly thanked everybody and reminded us all of how fortunate we were to be working with the South Newbury Benefice. It was a real joy to meet people from so many parishes and once again talk about the Emborne of years ago and to meet with past members of the congregation. Special thanks are due to Julian Dickens, whose inspiration it was. By John King. The 24th of August is the feast day of St Bartholomew. By Penny Fletcher. In the 4th century, Bishop Eusebius of Caesarea relates that when the 2nd century teacher St Pantaenus of Alexandria made a visit to India, he found a Hebrew copy of St Matthew's Gospel, which had been left behind there by Bartholomew. Traditionally, Bartholomew also served as a missionary to Ethiopia, Iran, and Turkey. The apostle is said to have been martyred at the command of the Armenian king. His remains were supposedly taken to the Church of St Bartholomew in the Tiber, Rome. Does this have any relevance to the UK in the 21st century? Yes, I think in a roundabout way it does. St Bartholomew's Day became infamous in history for the massacre which took place in France in 1542. Traditionally believed to have been instigated by Catherine de' Medici, the massacre took place a few days after the wedding day, 18th of August, of the king's sister to the Protestant Henry of Navarre. Many of the wealthiest and most prominent Huguenots had gathered in largely Catholic Paris to attend the wedding. The massacre began in the night of 23rd to the 24th of August, 1572. Though by no means unique, it was the worst of the century's religious massacres. Throughout Europe, it instilled in Protestants the indelible conviction that Catholicism was a bloody and treacherous religion. Modern estimates for the number of dead across France vary widely, from 5,000 to 30,000. Present in Paris at this time was Francis Walsingham. Whilst Huguenots were being slaughtered in the streets, Walsingham, his 5-year-old daughter Frances, and the pregnant Ursula were at home in their house at Saint Marceau. Also with them were Ursula's brother-in-law, Robert Beale, who was Walsingham's secretary, and the Earl of Leicester's 20-year-old nephew, Philip Sidney. English Protestants rushed to the embassy for sanctuary, as did the French nobleman Sieur de Bricmont. There is no written record of Walsingham's reactions to the massacre, but the shock and horror it engendered made him even more determined to promote the Protestant cause and fight the tyranny of Catholicism as practised by Philip of Spain and the Guise family. This, following the reign of Bloody Mary, has had an effect right down the centuries. In 1678, Titus Oates was responsible for inventing a plan supposedly hatched by the Jesuits to assassinate King Charles II and to enthrone his Roman Catholic brother James. Alternatively, in 1683, the Rye House plot was a conspiracy to assassinate Charles II because of his pro-Catholic policies. Sadly, the memory of the massacre seared deep into the English psyche. The penal laws against Catholics started to be dismantled from 1766. 1782, the right to purchase land was restored to Catholics, and a number of restrictions on the Catholic clergy were relaxed, though various limits placed upon these concessions reflect the continuing unease among Protestants over granting full civil and political liberty to Catholics. The most significant measure was the Roman Catholic Relief Act, 1829, which removed the most substantial restrictions on Roman Catholicism in the United Kingdom. Only recently was a law passed allowing a member of the royal family to marry a Roman Catholic. Today, Christianity is struggling to make itself heard, i.e., the recent attack by MPs telling the Church to keep out of politics. Surely the time has come for Christians to speak out with one voice. What can we do? Well, in the 80s and 90s, Kintbury held a monthly ecumenical service, visiting in turn the Methodist Church, St. Cassian's and St. Mary's. Besides understanding each other, it was fun and once included Irish music. We attended a Catholic Mass, an Anglican Eucharist and a Methodist communion service, receiving a blessing if we could not take communion. We had discussions, shared thoughts. Of course, the late and much-loved Brother Gus was a prime organiser in this. COVID has engendered a need for rethinking the way forward, searching for a new path. If not monthly, could we not once a year use St. Bartholomew's Day to gather and share our insights and demonstrate unity? The Beacon welcomes points of view, a sharing of thoughts. If you wish to respond, please do so. Contact details are at the back of this issue. Miss Wilmot's Ghost, contributed by Anna Newton. A poem inspired by the life and work of gardening genius Ellen Wilmot at Warley Place, Brentwood, Essex. Anna writes, "Some time ago now, when I was lecturing in garden history, I was encouraged by Ken Senecki, then Secretary of the Garden History Society, to send her a poem I had written about the famous Miss Wilmot's garden at Warley Place, Brentwood, Essex, having just read a life of her. Kay had a fellow archivist looking after these archives, and it was she who was the eventual recipient of my poem. After some time, a letter of thanks came from the archivist, together with a copy of a letter from Graham Stuart Thomas, expressing his thanks for his visit to Warley Place in 1981. Some other information on the life at Warley Place, as it was during Miss Wilmot's life, was also included. I was a great fan of Graham Thomas, head of the National Trust Gardens for so many years, my tutor at one time, and such a greatly respected botanist, artist, gardener, director, and splendid teacher. The garden is still open near Brentwood and close to the M25 northbound. With the through London Elizabeth line, it is a real possibility to visit now. Anna Newton. Anna's poem was inspired by the book Miss Wilmot's Ghosts, The Extraordinary Life and Gardens of a Forgotten Genius by Sandra Lawrence, published by Blink Publishing, 2022. Miss Wilmot's Ghost. In the archive, Erogenium giganteum. Along the winding paths, down memory lane I go, following the trail, in sunshine and in rain, from potting shed to borders. I see the stonework cracked and green, the spiky silver grey of leaves that look like holly. It calls to mind one celebrated gardener's folly. I am posing Warley hybrids. I am recalling all the names that have connections to the person or the place. Mr. William Robinson, Miss Jekyll, Mr. Bowles, Mr. Hanbury, and many more. All had their say. Plant collector Mr. Wilson wrote from far Saskatchewan, to where he'd sailed away. I can recall the story of that place in all its glory. 100 gardens, so they say. Every horticultural device, grafted cuttings and advice, all shared among the green elite. Miss Ellen then acknowledged by every garden buff, in Essex, France and Italy, while travelling in her brougham down the street. Now all one sees in this long-lost garden are these gigantic seeds, greyish-white and crackling, blowing and desiccating in the breeze. Growing still they will, in every nook and cranny, this energetic creeper, Miss Wilmot's ghost, no sleeper. Miss Wilmot's ghost is the common name for Erogenium giganteum. The name comes about because, allegedly, Ellen would secretly scatter the plant seeds in various gardens she visited. The seeds produced the ghostly flowered plants as if from nowhere, hence becoming known as Miss Wilmot's ghost. A pruning of books. Cavalier Generals by John Barrett. Catastrophe by Max Hastings. River Kings by Cat Jarman, new. John of Gaunt by Anthony Goodman. From the House of War by John Simpson. The Burgundians by Bart von Loo, brand new, £30. No, I didn't. It was a present via Blackwell's, so guess second hand, but never touched. The Lost Heart of Asia by Colin Thubron. Fallout, A Year of Political Mayhem by Tim Shipman. The Reason Why, Russell's Dispatches from Crimea, Wellington's Peninsular Victories. 3. One hard, 2 paperback, not in good condition. All in excellent condition. If anyone is interested, available for a small donation, or large if you feel inclined, for St Mary's, Kintbury, please contact Penny at ian_Fletcher43@btinternet.com. Walbury Beacon Benefice contact details. Jenny Veazey, email jennyveazey@hotmail.com. Benefice Office 01635 226 064. Email wbboffice@gmail.com. Items for the Beacon to fill on pji@crestednewtcomputing.co.uk. To be added to the Beacon distribution list, please email the office. Services in Walbury Beacon Benefice for August 2022. All services are dependent on ministry availability. To check for changes, please always check the weekly Benefice email if you are on the circulation list. To add your name, contact Alex on wbboffice@gmail.com. Look on the website https://www.walburybeaconbenefice.org.uk/ or a church near you https://www.achurchnearyou.com for up-to-date information, confirmation of service times and location. In order to protect more vulnerable parishioners, we would appreciate those attending services in all our churches to continue practising hand sanitising, wearing of face masks, and respect for those who wish to maintain social distancing. Sunday, 7th of August. Ink pen, Benefice service, morning praise, 9:45 a.m. Sunday, 31st of August. Enbourne, matins, 9:45 a.m. West Woody, Holy Communion, 11:15 a.m. Kintbury, Benefice Songs of Praise, 6 p.m. Sunday, 21st of August. Kintbury, Holy Communion, 9:45 a.m. Coombe, Holy Communion, 11:15 a.m. Inkpen, Compline, 6 p.m. Sunday, 28th of August. Enbourne, Holy Communion, 9:45 a.m. Wednesday, 31st of August. Kintbury, licensing of Reverend Canon Annette Shannon as Rector of Walbury Beacon Benefice, 7 p.m.